Good afternoon, welcome to the UK Column Live. It's the 21st of February 2013, it's just gone 1 o'clock. Myself and Mike Robertson, the dream team, are on today, and we've got Neil Foster here as well, and we have Patrick Henningsen joining us via Skype. Afternoon, Mike.
Afternoon, Louise.
What's the weather doing, Mike?
I haven't got a clue.
It's cold. Don't know what the temperature is, but it's very cold down here in Plymouth, and in Pembrokeshire apparently, so there you go. What's the first story, Mike?
Well, we're of course starting with this shock as the jury in the Vicky Pryce trial collapses. And basically, well, I'm going to start off by saying that if there's anybody that knows anybody watching this that knows anybody that was on that jury or can contact anybody who was on that jury, we're very interested in speaking to them. I believe this is a setup. You know, basically, the judge got extremely disappointed that the jury were taking so long to arrive at a verdict, and he was, it seems, unhappy with the quality of the questions that the jury was asking him. Everybody agrees that at least some of the questions that were being asked were sensible questions, such as, you know, can you explain to us what reasonable doubt means, these kind of things. But basically, the BBC in particular has just gone nuts over this. They are absolutely pushing the idea. They had Joshua Rosenberg, for example, who was at one time a BBC legal correspondent. He was on the BBC News last night talking about how really, you know, juries just aren't clever enough to deal with some of these trials. You know, people are just too stupid really to know what's right and wrong.
So what does he suggest?
Well, of course, we get rid of juries and hear trials in front,
or alternatively,
just in front of a judge.
Yeah, but there is an alternative that someone's come up with about to do with tests. Is that not right? IQ tests.
Oh well, yes. Well, indeed, that is in fact the next slide, because yes, according to the Mail, well, in fact, this is Melanie Phillips is saying this. Do we need IQ tests for juries? I could perhaps understand that if there's a particularly complex case involving deep science, scientific, lots of scientific terms, or medical or something like that, perhaps you might want to choose jurors that perhaps have a bit of knowledge that they can bring to the table. But basically, we've got to remember at the end of the day that this is about presenting evidence to juries. The evidence should be presented in a way that juries can understand, you know, whereas juries shouldn't be directed as to the ultimate outcome of the trial. A judge should have the patience to answer juries' questions, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Patrick, have you got any comments on that?
No, but this kind of follows along the narrative we've seen recently about the introduction of secret courts and statutory courts, administrative courts, because as we can see right now in Britain in 2013, Britain is morphing into a corporate state. So with the corporate state, we'll need to basically run people through administrative courts. As we saw in the London riots 2 summers ago, the 24-hour courts, particularly in a situation of civil unrest, for instance, this is the method of choice by the state, because, you know, it's a very dangerous thing to say that trial by jury isn't efficient, or that jurors aren't intelligent enough to make the right judgments on a case. This is going backwards. This is regressing. So, you know, Europe has progressed over so many hundreds of years, and this is a move of regression. This is a step backwards.
Well, I mean, the point that I would make on this is that this is a common law country, as is the United States. Our law is based on the decisions of juries. We've got 1,000 years of decisions of juries behind us. Juries have been quite capable of making decisions. Yes, there have been miscarriages of justice in the past, but those were miscarriages of justice the fault of the juries, or the fault of a stitch-up on the part of the people participating in the trial. But our common law is based on the decisions of juries. The other thing to say on this, I think, is that I think the main reason that juries are being vilified in this way is not only in criminal cases but also in libel, as we know that the government has stated that it has the intention of removing juries from, or at least removing the right to a jury from a libel case. And the other area where it's very difficult to get a jury is in an inquest into somebody's death. And it's quite difficult these days to get a jury in on an inquest into somebody's death, particularly where a hospital is concerned. So again, you kind of see the policy, which is to get rid of anything or to gag any process or procedure which could identify failures in government and could perhaps prevent the government from pressing on with their fascist agenda. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and particularly, Mike, you brought up a very important point, which is in the libel cases. As we're reaching a kind of a zeitgeist of government corruption and people within government who are being accused of various crimes, felonies, child abuse particularly, we're reaching a real apex in corruption right now. Look at the approval ratings of Parliament, for instance. So again, this seems like a trend that's moving, and this is something that people in power throughout history have always sought to do, which is to eliminate the public from the process and to keep things out of public view. So again, you could argue that something like Leveson, for instance, is to keep corruption out of the press, and now this is a move to keep the public out of the judicial process. So what you have really is something very dark in terms of its shape, and definitely it's a move backwards. This is regression, and we should be progressing in the 21st century, but here we are. We're fighting against some of the basic freedoms and principles which people have fought long and hard for over the last few hundred years.
Yeah, Neil, you have a comment?
Yeah, I couldn't hear what Patrick was saying here, but he's maybe covered it already. But I mean, the theory is you're supposed to be given a trial by jury by your peers. So are they suggesting that this group of people were below the socio-economic level of intelligence for this particular person as well? They were obviously too stupid to be considered a peer, as it were, of Miss Price.
Yeah.
And also, it's highly offensive to call anybody stupid and ignorant.
Yeah, well,
on the basis of the judge.
Indeed, and like I say, we are very keen to speak to anybody that was on that jury, because it seems like a stitch up to us. But anyway, let's move on to Chairman Cameron. We did cover this somewhat yesterday because he was visiting Amritsar, as we know, but it seems that he's gone beyond just not making an apology. He has.
Do you want me to say what he said?
Go for it.
He said he turned around and defended the achievements of British rule in India by saying, I think there is an enormous amount to be proud of what the British Empire did and was responsible for, but of course there were bad events as well as good.
Yes, because of course we did bring them civilization after all. I mean, these people had no civilization until we arrived, right? Look, the point I want to make about this is the empire then, as today, is the City of London.
Yeah.
It always has been. The empire has had nothing to do with the people of the United Kingdom or Great Britain or whatever it was at the time. He actually said the bad events we should learn from and the good events we should celebrate, and perhaps he's talking about the Opium Wars.
Maybe.
The Opium Wars that are still running. Now they're running in Afghanistan instead of China, but they're still going on.
Yeah.
So, Patrick, anything?
Yeah, anybody with a cursory knowledge of history, particularly with regards to India, can't put aside the fact that before partition, one of the British Empire's parting gifts to the country of India was to create a permanent sectarian divide. And if anybody even has seen the film Gandhi, which was a pretty accurate depiction of how that was engineered by pitting Hindus against Muslims. And of course, we saw a mass exodus of Muslims to Pakistan and to Bangladesh. But that was the parting gift from the British Empire. And that's a sectarian situation that has caused the world a lot of pain, death, and also a nuclear arms race in the region. So, we see that the puppeteer's hand behind the scenes engineering, a lot of bombings, police stations, and the British-controlled press right before partition, right as India fell into that sort of turmoil, was a British-controlled press in India. So they managed to transmit that sectarian division and that message of hate right across the country in real time. And that's the situation we have today. Otherwise, you'd have a united India, which would probably be the premier superpower, at least in Asia right now, had that not happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, moving on. Staying with Chairman Cameron, he's now going to divert aid money directly into. So there's no more hiding behind aid projects.
No.
He's now just
10 billion he's going to give out of the aid budget, and apparently he's going to spend it on peacekeeping and other defence-related projects. Oxfam's head of policy, Max Lawson, has said hospitals, not gunships. I quite agree with you there. And Mr Cameron has said he intends to protect all 10 billion of Britain's aid budget, promising to spend only 0.7% of national income on this development.
Well,
So
that's
there
nice.
you go,
No doubt that's why. I can't remember which ship is over in Libya at the minute selling arms.
Yeah, the frigate that's out there
Yeah,
for the arms fair in April.
Mike, that story comes on the back of the admission this week, as David Cameron was doing this tour of India, that the British have been supplying the regime in Sri Lanka with millions in small arms. And this is a brutal regime that arguably is involved in genocide, mass killing and not allowing for any sort of discourse and autonomy with the Tamil.
So I mean, Channel 4 News exposed this about a year ago. I think the absolute massacre that was going on at the behest of the Sri Lankan government on the Tamils, and the British government has said that they supplied at least some of the weapons for that. That's nice.
Yeah, and so again, we see David Cameron, who is the arms industry's chief sales rep globally, and especially in the Middle East and Asia. So going on and peddling for sales, basically. It's what Tony Blair did when he was in his latter years as Prime Minister, and David Cameron has taken that baton and it's continued that relay race, which is the arms race.
Well, we've got to remember that David Cameron was supported by arms dealers in his leadership challenge for the leadership of the Conservative Party, so he has a history. But if we move on then, Chairman Cameron is almost also saying that Sir David Nicholson, the head of the National Health Service, should not be seen as a scapegoat. Don't make him a scapegoat, he said, with regard to what's going on in Mid Staffordshire and the NHS in general. So the National Health Service is killing people, but we're not to make the person who is most responsible for that, because he runs the show.
Yeah, he might get upset.
We must not make him a scapegoat.
Shocking.
That I can't disagree more with Mr. Cameron. We must focus on the people that are actually responsible for the policies which are causing the deaths of the decision making that's causing people's deaths. So perhaps scapegoat is not the word, but certainly we shouldn't prevent somebody being brought to book for their actions by pretending that it's an act of scapegoating, because it isn't. Yeah. Okay, let's move along. David Cameron is heading back to Eastleigh. Now, he went to Eastleigh last week to campaign, and they sent him to a branch of B&Q.
Okay.
Where he told the staff at B&Q that, in fact, the only DIY he'd ever done was with IKEA products, and as you can imagine, that went down pretty well. That certainly got him some votes. But he also told the people at B&Q that in fact it was Samantha that was the main user of tools in the household, so he's going back anyway to try and repair some of the damage. It seems. I think he's probably going to do a good job for the Labour Party.
Yeah,
I don't see the Liberal Democrats getting back in.
No.
Okay, now.
Ugh.
Right, basically what we'd like to say to our viewers is this. Tony Blair is giving a speech to Lafayette College in the United States on March the 6th, and any of our US viewers, and we have a few, that are in can possibly get to that event, please get in touch, and we will supply you with some UK column newspapers to give to him if you can. We would, particularly if you've got a video camera, we're very keen to pass a message along to
Definitely.
Tony Blair. If you would,
I'd just like to say, I found out today that he actually charges $200,000 for a speaking event. That's how much people pay him to go and speak.
Neil.
And this man's never after anything. He's not after the money, is he?
Well, just the name of the lecture. It's quite ironic that this man presided over the installation of tens of thousands of CCTV cameras, etc., and snooping and all the rest of it. And it's called the Lives of Liberty lecture.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Let's
move on.
Move on.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Oh,
Patrick, did you have something
sorry.
to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that Hillary Clinton has also registered with the same agency. I believe that Tony Blair gets Tony Blair his bookings. So the talent agency for speaking engagement. So you've got now Hillary, who obviously she'll be campaigning for presidency in 2016, but she's also available if you are interested at $500,000 per hour.
Maybe
Oh, is that all?
Maybe we'll get her onto UK Column Live then.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
So she has actually declared for 2016.
Well, she has. A leak came out from a close friend. That story's on 21st Century Wire last week. But she will be campaigning. That saved some turmoil within the Democratic Party, or an Obama impeachment when they put Biden in for the next term. But that is the case. But it's good to see our ex-politicians at least getting some form of income, a stream of income after their political careers are over. I think that's fantastic.
Well, I mean, in the past, whenever somebody has been standing for presidency who may have had some kind of medical issue in the past, that's kind of counted against them. She obviously feels that the brain hemorrhage that she had at Christmas isn't serious enough to do her any kind of long-term political damage.
Yeah, well, there is some rumor. We'll probably publish it in the next day or so that Hillary wasn't a brain hemorrhage, that she possibly was overseas.
Getting a new brain or something?
No, she was overseas and was had to have there's a plane that had to land at an airfield in Iran. It was a U.S. plane, and it was down around similar time that Hillary was disappeared from public life. So perhaps she was in Iran doing some negotiations behind the scenes, and U.S. Teams had to go and repair that plane. It took 2 weeks. They took all the people from the plane and transferred them immediately to Dubai, and I believe this was in the month of December. So that's something that wasn't covered in the press. There's rumors that Hillary was in fact part of that delegation. So that was interesting, which I found out. Anyway.
Good info, Patrick.
Okay, thank you. This one is for Neil. Basically, what has happened here apparently is that a specialist firearms policeman from the Prime Minister's protection unit has been found shot dead.
Well, it was this happened a couple of days ago, but it was only apparently reported last night.
Right.
They've not named the gentleman. He was found with a single shotgun wound, and they're trying to assess whether it's his own issued weapon.
But this looks like another police suicide, does it?
Well, that's what they're saying it is.
Yes.
They're not looking for anybody in connection with it. So, they're assuming that he shot himself, but they don't know.
Well, I mean, we have been seeing a rise in police suicides over I mean, we've talked about it on the UK Column Live before. If it is a suicide, then it's terrible. It's terrible in any case. But
could it be a suicide? Could maybe be something more sinister? Did he know something? Don't know, do we?
Well, we don't know. But what we do know is that Hertfordshire Constabulary do not want to tell us exactly what's going on with regard to police leave in the month of March. Now, we had a tip-off a week or so ago that police leave had been cancelled for the month of March and possibly for later in the year as well.
This was just for Hertfordshire, though, wasn't it?
This is all the information that we have at the moment for Hertfordshire Constabulary. So we phoned the the press team at Hertfordshire Constabulary on Monday and didn't get a response on Monday, and we didn't get a response on Tuesday. And so yesterday I phoned back, and the gentleman that I spoke to said, "Oh yes, we've been discussing this quite a lot in the office, this request, and my colleague will call you back," and they didn't. So I called them back again today, and what they said was, we are not aware of leave cancellations, any kind of cancelled leave for the month of March. Now, the person who told us this has had it from 3 separate sources. And 3 independent sources, so it wasn't people from the same team or whatever. 3 separate sources, and so we tend to believe that in fact leave has been cancelled in Hertfordshire, but Hertfordshire
I've been told not
press have I reiterate what they said. They said we are not aware. We've asked in various places, but we are not aware. So they didn't say that it hasn't. It was not a definitive no. Neil.
I mean, you can also tie this in with the memo that you spoke about previously in the UK column, and which you have a copy of in the new newspaper.
Yes. Where
the Luton Borough Council, which is the county next door in Bedfordshire, are sending out requests to ascertain who's a member of the Territorial Army, special constables, magistrates, and army reservists. So there's clearly something going on.
Well, the other interesting thing that they said was, well, the lady that I was speaking to eventually was very interested in who my source might have been. But the other question that she asked me was, did your source say that this was a national cancellation of leave, or was it just Hertfordshire, they said? And I found that quite a suggestive question.
Yeah.
That perhaps there's well, first of all, she was digging, of course, but she was almost implying that perhaps this cancellation of leave does go beyond Hertfordshire, and she wanted to know whether I knew that or not. So anybody that can add anything to this, please get in touch. We think this is quite an interesting story. We're very concerned that perhaps there's an expectation of some kind of need for police, magistrates, TA and reservists to be available at some point in the not too distant future.
And what month was it? March?
Oh, this was March. This one, yeah. Okay. In Syria, then, well, this is actually Lebanon. Free Syrian Army threatens to shell Hezbollah in Lebanon. Really, Patrick, I'm just going to pass this over to you to talk about, because this looks like yet another escalation of the sort of the Free Syrian terrorists getting involved in cross-border activities.
Yeah, this is a blatant attempt to drag the other people and other countries into this conflict. And of course, if Lebanon is dragged into this conflict, then it will be officially a regional conflict, and that would prompt the UN to convene an emergency meeting and possibly pass a resolution that might involve maybe a no-fly zone, for instance, or the intervention of US or French or British forces. Now, what's interesting about this is, you have the Free Syrian Army, or it's the Free Syrian Army is basically a confab of about 30 or 40 different armed mercenary groups, and of course there are a few that are trying to take the lead on the military side, like the Nusra Front, which is being backed by the Saudi Arabians and some of these other factions. Now, so here we have the Syrian state of Syria, the government of Syria, which has had sanctions put against it, is not allowed to transfer anything between itself and its trading partner Russia. But you have the militant, many of them foreign fighters, who are being funded and given support from countries like the United States, Great Britain, and of course the Gulf states, mainly Qatar and Saudi Arabia. So they're the rebels, as they're called, are and many of them are terrorists, or Al-Qaeda terrorists. Of course, the people, some executives at the BBC might disagree with me on that, but they are terrorists. They're allowed to get foreign support, arms over the border, and so forth. Now, Syria is wanting to reach out for a little bit of help from Hezbollah next door to balance the situation out. And of course, here comes the Free Syrian Army with this statement. Now, the Free Syrian Army are not able to attack Lebanon. What they can do, though, is they can inflame border skirmishes. And the first place where that might happen is a pronounced sectarian divide, which is in Tripoli, which is in the north of Lebanon. And that is where it's most likely to kick off if that does happen. But let me just tell our viewers here, and to tell anyone else who's listening, that this is an artificial provocation. And no doubt that they've got the okay to make this statement from the West or from the Gulf states, which are acting as a proxy for the Anglo-Americans in this situation. So not good, definitely not good. But, you know, it doesn't surprise me. It would be very unfortunate if that was the case.
Right. Well, the next article is that Russia seems to be evacuating its citizens from Syria. It's sending more warships. Russia seems to see the Syrian situation itself degrading even further. And of course, we've also got this report of 20 killed in an air raid in Damascus, on a Damascus suburb. So on both sides of this conflict, it seems to be escalating, and particularly around the Damascus area itself. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah. If the Free Syrian Army does attack Lebanon, it could be, among other things, a nail in their own coffin, because clearly this is if they were truly some sort of opposition, the last thing they would want to do was to get any of the neighboring states involved. They've tried to do this with Turkey. A number of sort of false flags over the Turkish border to try to draw Turkey and NATO effectively into the conflict. So this is and you have the West trying to identify an opposition group that they can sort of do business with on the ground there. So it's a complete mess. Their timetable is way behind. Syria is supposed to be done and dusted by now, as far as Western central planning goes. But of course, it wasn't a slam dunk like Libya was.
Yeah.
It's because they didn't get their no-fly zone early on in the game. So this is going to be a longer, drawn-out, perhaps uglier conflict than what we saw in Libya.
I think I also saw a report, I don't have it included in this, that Israel had been flying more drones over Syrian airspace. So Israel, of course, is still waiting in the wings for some excuse.
Yeah, Israel's kept very quiet with regards to the whole Syrian thing, and that I was always very suspicious about that. And then when I saw a few incidents that happened, which was activity in the Golan Heights area, and Israel claiming some self-defense, needing to maybe secure that and take it over as a buffer zone. But this has been a UNIFIL UN peacekeeping team along that corridor, and also this Israel strike on a Syrian convoy and a Syrian military research facility outside Damascus 2 weeks ago. Very suspicious. So clearly Israel is in contact with Washington and London in real time, and Israel does have skin in this game. What Israel can benefit from is perhaps an annexation of the Golan Heights area, which is resource-wise is very helpful for Israel in the long run. But also, this is not a good thing for Israel because the Assad government has supported the peace treaty with Israel since the early 70s. So it's not what they're going to get if the Assad government falls is a sectarian Syria that's going to be embroiled in sort of little clashes for quite a long time to come. It's going to resemble something like what we see in Libya, which is very unstable and not a good place for countries to do any sort of diplomatic business.
And Iraq, for that matter.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, moving on then. This article's from the Telegraph, and I found it quite disturbing. Really, this is lawyers and activists, according to the Telegraph, are claiming that large numbers of children, some as young as 9, have been illegally imprisoned during protests in Egypt, and that they're being subject to torture, including beatings, electrocution, being forced to strip naked before being drenched in cold water, being forced to drink a foul soup consisting of salt dissolved in water. And one person that's commenting on this has said it's up to 400 children have been detained by police during the outbreaks of violence. I mean, what can you say about that? Is this what the new democratized Middle East is going to can expect in the coming months and years? Is that what the Arab Spring is about?
Yeah, where are the speeches? Where are the great grandiose speeches from Obama, from Hillary Clinton, from William Hague, from David Cameron? Where are these great, Arab Spring, freedom and democracy, and this is a great moment in history? Where are the Anderson Coopers and all these Western journalists now? They've just left this whole situation to fester on its own. Of course, we know from history now very clearly that the Arab Spring was engineered, and it was mainly engineered from outside of these Arab countries, and Egypt and Tunisia being the greatest example of that. And now what we have in Egypt, I mean, Egypt is, it's basically like a new president changed the police commissioner, but keep the police force. The military and the security services have a culture like the Los Angeles Police Department has of being, racist and being brutal, violent, and being power crazy. So that's not going to change, and that's always been the case in that country, although it's more pronounced now because of the amount of civil unrest. Yeah, Egypt has got a long road to go before it sees anything that resembles what you might call progressive democracy. But, if you look at our governments, we may not have this level of violence, but we definitely have the level of corruption that exists at the upper levels, tiers of government that these countries have. So, it's a very interesting parallel.
So Patrick, would you advise not to go on holiday this year? Because I was considering going to Egypt on holiday this year, taking the kids for a week.
It's probably, Sharm el Sheikh, if you're going to the Red Sea, it's fine. You probably get a good deal. But
I think I'll just give it a miss this year. I think we'll do
I would say stay away from Cairo for now. Probably not the best sort of destination. There's plenty of other places.
I think
you can
Costa
get.
del Sol would be just fine, I think.
Yeah, okay. Right, moving on then. Some economic stuff then. George Osborne is pledging to help the world's poor fight tax abuse.
Oh.
I'm sure they are delighted to hear that. So he has reaffirmed his promise on aid and pledges to join forces with the developing world to beat corporate cheats.
Wow.
So what's really going on here? This is fresh from the G20 meeting of finance ministers in Moscow. He told The Observer that the UK wants to rewrite the rules of the corporate game. Basically, he's in the business of creating a global tax infrastructure. That's what this is about. This whole business of corporations not paying tax in one country and being domiciled in another country. Clearly, borders and nation states are no longer appropriate for the modern world, and we've got to just get rid of them. I think that's the agenda that's going on here. Well, I think that there's no more to be said on that. We need to, rather than getting rid of nation states, we need to get rid of George Osborne.
Yes,
that's
and his friends.
And then the pound has collapsed as a result of the admission by the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee that actually Mervyn King himself voted to support further spending, more quantitative easing. In fact, it was I believe a 6-3 vote against quantitative easing, but because Mervyn King changed his mind on this, that was seen as a negative thing as far as the pound is concerned. We've got all this commentary in the press at the moment about currency wars, and in fact, this next article is case in point. Japan to see unprecedented monetary easing, quantitative easing, so more and more money printing in this year, and Japan is basically attempting to devalue its currency relative to others in order to compete with South Korea, because the major Japanese corporations like Sony and Panasonic are absolutely failing to compete with the likes of Samsung and other South Korean companies at the moment. So it's interesting times on the financial markets. But for Spain, it's not so bad because apparently, according to the Prime Minister Rajoy, he has averted the Spanish economic disaster.
All right.
So all the Spanish people that are starving, the 50% plus youth unemployment, the situation in Spain couldn't be better, according to Prime Minister Rajoy, which probably explains why yet another major property company has just filed for insolvency because Rajoy has solved the economic problems in Spain. Yeah, and it's just incredible the world that these people seem to inhabit because they don't exhibit any signs of reality in the speeches that they give.
All's great in their little bubble.
Yeah. Richard Branson. Well, Richard Branson is giving away half his money.
Fortune. Oh,
Half
that's
his
good of
fortune,
him.
that's the word.
Where's
Thank
he,
you.
is he sending it to the UK column?
Well, sadly, he's not sending it to the UK. In fact, he's
How
not making
rude.
any contribution to the UK column at all for some reason. No, in fact, he is sending it to the Giving Pledge campaign,
Oh, yeah.
which was set up by Warren Buffett and Bill Gates.
Oh, like he really needs the money.
Well, at the point, you've got to understand what they're doing.
I can understand. I'm just.
This is in order to finance global vaccines
Yep.
and this kind of thing. So this is an important place that this money is going to, and we've got to understand that Richard Branson is right behind this global agenda.
Yeah.
Anybody,
Sad
any
but true.
comments?
Well, this is a similar phrase to what Bill Gates used a couple of weeks ago, where they said he had no use for money anymore.
No
except
use
to
for the
give it
money
away.
anymore. Yeah. So just do anything with it, Patrick.
Hey, Mike, yeah, I also might add that I believe, and I think I'm not mistaken, Vladimir Putin also made this exact same move. So he's joining the elite circle, and Putin's like Russia's 10th richest man right now. He's valued at $4 billion or something like that. So he's joined the Bill Gates inner circle to give away his fortune. And what's interesting is that Putin's cut his kids out of the inheritance, basically, because he said that he didn't want to corrupt his kids with loads of money. But what's also should be pointed out here is this is also these announcements by people like Richard Branson, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Branson, I'm sorry, but this is very good. This is worth billions in public relations, in PR, to make such an announcement, to make yourself as a kind of modern day altruistic billionaire in the Carnegie in Mellon veneer. But the other thing is there's also there could be tax advantages to this as well, combined with other economic opportunities by joining this special elite club. So in other words, you might give away such and such billions of pounds or dollars, but you might also make another 10 or 20 billion by joining this inner circle, and it gives you access to the sort of elite billionaires and doing business together. So I'm a little bit skeptical. I think if someone really wanted to give away their fortune to help the world, they might do it in a more direct fashion. Richard Branson could take billions of dollars and go and literally build homes for thousands of villagers in Africa, and build schools, things like this. Vaccines, I don't think the world needs more vaccines right now, especially looking at the record of the vaccinations and some of the problems that we've had and have been clearly documented with a lot of the vaccines. You've seen the outbreak of rickets in the United States recently is a direct result of the chickenpox vaccine. So we want to maybe give these chickenpox vaccines to African children, maybe in India as well, and they can have an outbreak of rickets there from an autoimmune response to what is clearly a product that's being dumped on these people by the pharmaceutical manufacturers. So I don't think you're doing a very good job by promoting more vaccines. We've already got more vaccines for kids than you can shake a stick at.
Yeah, it's disgraceful, isn't it?
My parents only had 2, I think, in their whole life, and they lived very healthy lives. So
So,
Why do-
so Patrick, I mean, what do you make of Putin then? Because obviously Putin started off being financed by Russian oligarchs, then he eventually put most of the Russian oligarchs into prison, and the ones that he didn't escaped to Britain. And now he's inviting Morgan Stanley back into Russia. And now, if what you're saying is correct, he's also trying to join this elitist club. Where is his allegiance? Is he just out for himself, just another psychopath out for himself, or what is actually going on with his relationship with his country?
Well, you look at, there was basically a gold rush once the Soviet Union collapsed, and a lot of the sort of state assets, state companies, there was a huge land rush basically for all these companies, and a lot of people got very wealthy by accumulating shares in these companies, which later got sold, at a profit. So that's how a lot of these fortunes were made. So Putin was definitely in on the ground level of that gold rush, as was people like Roman Abramovich, the owner of Chelsea Football Club, and Berezovsky and some of these other oligarchs. And Eugenie Lebedev, I believe, is based in Britain right now. So it's Putin is the most popular politician in Russia right now. So he did win a lion's share of the votes in the elections, but he's also a new breed of head of state who happens to be one of the richest people in the country. So you can argue about whether that's a good thing or not.
So he's just another Berlusconi then?
Well, yeah, slightly different. Berlusconi did it in a different way. He bought the media up first, and was able to control the media. And as we know, in Italy, the media makes the kings, as it does in many other countries. So, yeah, through media ownership, and maybe you might find some of that in Putin's portfolio as well. But yeah, whole different genesis of a modern state there. So, but yeah, Putin is definitely moving into a globalist direction by, doing business with Morgan Stanley and joining the Bill Gates inner circle. Very interesting development, one that I would not have predicted.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, we'll move on. British-born workers took a majority of the jobs created in 2012, according to the Office for National Statistics. So almost 2 in 3 of the 584,000 jobs in coffee shops and supermarkets was taken by Brits. That's great to know.
That is great to know when so many, apparently so many people working in these coffee shops have actually probably gone on and trained for much higher kind of jobs, within other fields, that they're having to resort to working in coffee shops, etc.
Well, I was just thinking that, this probably explains Prince Philip's comments about Filipino nurses.
Oh.
Did you see about that?
I did see briefly,
Yes. Excuse me if I'm a little sceptical
Next.
about. Yes. Okay, Ireland, of course, facing greater budget surveillance. Ireland continuing to follow this austerity program in order to get bailout after bailout from the Troika. And again, Ireland now, it's just interesting that they use terms like surveillance. So we've got the European Union basically looking at every I that's dotted and T that's crossed with regard to Ireland's budget. They do anything wrong at all, basically they're now they're beholden to the IMF and the European Union. So I don't think that's a great position for any national government to be in, and they were a bit silly doing that in the first place. You should have done what Iceland did.
Child poverty.
Yes.
Yeah. This is Press TV found this. 1 in 5 British children is now living below the poverty line, according to End Child Poverty, which is a coalition of more than 150 charities. And they've revealed that 20.2% of British children are now classified as below the poverty line. The organisation created a map. I don't think we've got it, but there's a map created for where the hardest hit poverty is for kids around the country. And a speaker, Rianne Bayon, who works for Family Action, said the government must explain urgently how it is going to address these devastating findings by the End Child Poverty campaign. Maybe we stop buying arms and starting innocent wars and put our money back into the country for our kids, maybe? and stop paying off the IMF.
Perhaps we want to think about developing a productive economy rather than just
Absolutely.
paying off the bankers.
Yep.
But that article's interesting because I saw an article on Truth Out, I think it was truthout.org, talking about the situation in America, and they're basically saying that 50% of Americans are now considered to be either on extremely low income or actually in poverty.
Yeah.
So
A lot of that could do with that Obamacare as well. That people
well,
have to-
that's the last thing that they need. What they need is a sensible economy and proper
Of course,
jobs. So it's
absolutely.
just exactly the same agenda on
Yeah.
both sides of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Mike, can I add something to that?
Yes.
I think that's a severe underestimation. 1 in 5 children
No. Oh, so you're talking about in the UK? You mean?
in the UK.
Yeah.
I think it's much higher because, like you just said, the whole process and the business of gathering statistics and sort of making a value judgment on what are the sort of tiers of income is due for a massive overhaul, because there's a whole new paradigm right now. You have what's called the working poor. These are people who work in full-time jobs and people who have children, for instance, or single mothers, and real wages have not gone up. In fact, they've receded somewhat, and also inflation has gone up over the last 10 years. So I find that with energy prices skyrocketing and the councils continuing to press people with council tax and all these other sort of performance payments, that it's much higher than 1 in 5. I think in real terms, he's probably maybe 2 to 3 in 5, and to be realistic. If you look at what people take home versus what their personal liabilities are in terms of credit card debts and loans, I would say
Yeah.
on the balance sheet, it's much higher level of poverty.
Well, I mean, that it has to be said, that was the main thrust of the Truth Out article, because they were demonstrating how, in real terms, family incomes in the United States have collapsed in the last number of years, and that's happening here as well. My wife works in a primary school in a pretty poor part of Plymouth, and she's seeing children coming into school without proper lunches. They're coming into school with shoes that are beyond repair, and the presentation in the media that everybody's living on benefits and that they're making a fortune and they're getting 7-bedroom houses built for them and this kind of thing. It's a complete misrepresentation of what's actually going on. These are families that are stuck in a trap where they're penalised if they try to get work, and in the meantime they're vilified in the press, and the majority of people get the idea that in fact they're sponging off society. The fact of the matter is that people are suffering, quite a large number of people are suffering, and it needs to change. Neil, did you have something?
Yeah, it was put out, I mean, 1 in 5 children. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how many of them were in single-parent families, and with the majority being women, would be the single parent.
Yes.
And it was put out in the media about 3-4 years ago that single mothers may have to be put into dormitories. And they put this out as releasing housing stock and all the rest of it, but put into dormitories, and the children would be looked after by the state. So, maybe that's part of it as well.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Sorry, health.
Health. Apparently there's been peanut oil it's being put into vaccines. More than 1 million children living, this is in the States, suffer from the peanut allergy. I actually have the peanut allergy, and apparently it's to do with it's a cheaper way. The peanut oil is very cheap, and vaccine manufacturers decide to put it into their vaccines, which is now causing a massive rise in the amount of peanut allergy sufferers that there are nowadays. So that was just a brief overline of what they're putting in this stuff. It's just gets worse.
Okay, and what about Britain then?
Britain, we have an obesity epidemic apparently, and it shows 65% of men and 58% of women are now overweight. The situation apparently is going to get worse, with 1 in 10 children obese when they start school, and 1/5 of kids in their last year at primary school excessively overweight. This is on the back of what we did a story earlier in the week where a surgeon has called for children to go under the knife for obesity.
Right.
And,
Well, there is a bigger agenda here,
Go on
a
then.
United Nations agenda. It's linked to smoking, drinking, and obesity.
Yeah.
It's linked to the precautionary principle. We have quite a lot of stuff on the UK Column website, particularly by Martin Edwards. If people would like to read his One World Governance series on the UK Column website, we cover this UN agenda. The obesity, of course, is being caused by
fast foods.
by the reduction of quality of the foods that we're eating. It's being caused by poverty. It's being caused by the fact that they're selling off playing fields and other places where children can get outdoors. And children, of course, are being encouraged to sit inside and play computer games and watch television.
And there's no
So-
education on healthy food, nutrition, or anything.
Indeed. So, but this is a problem which is being created in order to provide a reaction and a solution. So, I recommend people have a read
Watch this
at
space.
Martin's articles on the Column website. Okay. Well, last week, I think it was last week, we discussed the latest
Drones.
UK drones,
Yep.
which are little helicopter
That's
type
right.
things that are about the size of the palm of your hand.
Yep.
And RT now is talking about the US equivalent.
They
And
are,
these
yeah.
seem quite amazing things.
They are quite amazing things. I was told about this actually last night, and apparently there's been a promotional video which has been released by the US Air Force, their research laboratory, and it's showing these bug-sized drones that can fly, crawl, perch and hover while performing unprecedented surveillance tasks and carrying out deadly targeted missions. And this little video has been released, and a comment from the US Air Force Research Lab has said it will become a vital element in the ever-changing war-fighting environment and will help ensure success on the battlefield of the future. The tiny drones will be able to enter inaccessible locations using new forms of navigation, such as a vision-based technique called optic flow, which can be used when traditional methods like GPS are unavailable. What on earth is going on? There's even pictures, they look like little, there's one like Neil showed me earlier, birds, insects, they're just...
Well, it's very Minority Report, isn't it?
yeah, very.
Neil.
Well, the one that's made to look like a bird can actually perch on electricity cables and telephone wires and charge itself and stay there permanently for as long as they want it to stay there. Or it can move to another location, so you think it's actually a live thing, but it'll just be charging itself up on another cable
Mental.
indefinitely.
Crazy.
Amazing. Right. Okay. This is the last one of this section then. Dragged out of bed, a man dies after a nighttime arrest for not paying council tax. Incredible. Another death in police custody. This gentleman's name was Steve Bohr, 31. He was awoken by two officers who arrived at night to arrest him at a friend's houseboat.
Whereabouts in the country is this?
This was Basildon direction.
In Essex?
Yes,
Okay.
Essex, yes. So the IPCC has said that they're investigating. Of course, it's terrible that when anybody dies in police custody, but I think too many people are dying
Too
in
many,
police
yeah.
custody, and particularly over something like council tax, which, if I'm right, is a civil matter, and I'm not clear why the. Well, I guess there was an arrest warrant out for him
Shocking.
issued by the council, and of course, without asking the council whether it was actually signed or stamped by a court, I'm quite sure the police acted.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I think the police are not doing the right thing with regard to council tax, and they should not be enforcing what is a civil matter.
They shouldn't. They shouldn't.
Okay, Patrick, before we go on to the second half of the programme, is there anything in the news that you spotted that you wanted to mention?
Well, there's quite a few stories yesterday. One of them that I might say, I spoke about this on the national U.S. radio show last night. I called this the feel-good story of the week. The Bulgarian parliament has resigned because of massive sustained protests by the people chanting outside the parliament building, "Mafia, mafia, mafia, resign, resign." And they buckled under pressure. And they basically handed the government back over to the people who are going to probably have elections, snap elections coming up soon, to replace everybody. So again, that's an interesting one. This is Bulgaria, the poorest country in the EU. So, you know,
Well, we,
on
we,
in the- all this-
we did talk about that. We did talk about that yesterday because Neil Foster, who's with us, actually has a house in Bulgaria and he's driving a Bulgarian car. He is from Scotland, so you know it's nice to see people moving from the west to the east rather than the other direction, isn't it? But yeah, yeah. Neil, go ahead.
There's very few CCTV cameras over there as well.
Yeah.
Very, very few.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, Pat?
And also, there's a landmark case which is heading to the U.S. Supreme Court this week, which is Monsanto is pushing for seed rights, and this is right up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and this is in their attempt to gain world domination over the global agricultural food production business. So it's a really important case. I think people should try to take a look at that and read about it as much as possible, because this is something, if a company like Monsanto is able to turn U.S. legislation and gain prominence in that market, it won't be long until it's a fait accompli for Europe.
Yeah.
So I think people need to pay really close attention to this and make sure that they put pressure on their elected representatives to keep this company out, because essentially what Monsanto is trying to do is gain a monopoly on the rights to own the patent to basic food, like say own the rights to corn. So if you're growing organic next door, they'll come and they'll serve you with a summons. They'll be suing you for growing your organic corn because they're saying that you're infringing on their patent. So this is a battle that's been going on for decades, and it's really coming to the forefront again right now. We need to keep fighting them back.
Okay.
Right. Patrick, can I just quickly ask you, there's been reports that there's a 9/11 author was found dead recently.
Yeah, Philip Marshall, very interesting story. There's this good story that was written by Greg Fernandez for 21st Century Wire. This is up on our website right now.
Yeah.
Philip Marshall wrote a 9/11 book, and mysteriously a couple of weeks ago was found in a suicide with a shotgun, and also his two beautiful children killed as well. This is a guy who's written about 4 books. He's a prolific author, and he's turned up dead for writing a 9/11 book. His name's Philip Marshall. No questions have been asked. It was an open shut case. No one seems to be suspicious. The only thing is, no one in the town had heard any gunshots, okay?
Yeah.
No one in town heard any gunshots. There were no reports of any screams. This is a very small, picturesque, absolutely cookie cutout American town called Murphy's in Northern California. So Philip Marshall turns up dead. Now it turns out, as we have pointed out in this article, great research by Greg Fernandez, is that Philip Marshall was working as a pilot with Barry Seal of Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton fame, and this was during the Iran-Contra days where they were shipped large amounts of cocaine from Nicaragua into the United States, but much of it via Mena, Arkansas, and also via an airport in Louisiana that had massive connections with the CIA. So Marshall is definitely a whistleblower. I would put him in the category as a whistleblower, and he would have intimate knowledge of some of these characters that helped to make a lot of money for people like the Clintons and other sort of criminal outfits, and linked with Pablo Escobar in the Medellin cocaine cartel. And here we have Marshall with good inside knowledge on 9/11, turns up dead. I don't know what the details of the shotgun wound is, if it was a shotgun wound to the back of the head, which is a suicide that you see a lot of, particularly in Arkansas. So this looks like an Arkansas suicide. So, it could have Clinton fingerprints on it. These sort of related criminal cartels who masquerade as politicians and so forth in America. But it's also got links to Jim Garrison. It's the same city where Jim Garrison was from, who ran the JFK trial with Clay Shaw.
Yeah.
Very interesting story. I would say this is pretty fascinating.
Maybe you can come on Liberty Tactics tomorrow and we can go a bit more in depth with it tomorrow.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to say maybe you should get Greg Fernandez on.
Yeah.
Because he's from We Are Change San Francisco, fantastic guy.
Oh, brilliant idea. All right, we'll catch up later, Patrick. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Okay, Patrick, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to the second bit, which is an interview that I did earlier in the week with Chris Kitsey from Before It's News, the Before It's News website. Now, before I put this on, I've got to hold my hands up and say I made a complete
Fail.
Yes. One silly little checkbox on a piece of software, and I must apologise. We have echo on his audio as a result of my mistake.
But it's worth it. It's worth playing it out, isn't it?
Yeah, we're going to show it anyway. We're going to do something again with them in the not too distant future, and we'll do it right this time. But I just think that we're going to play it anyway because the things that he said there's quite a lot of good stuff in it. So please stick with it despite the audio problems on his side.
And Mike and Malcolm will be back tomorrow. You two?
Yes, Malcolm will be with me
you
tomorrow.
Yes.
Super.
Okay,
So let's give this a go. I started off just by asking him to introduce himself, and this is what he had to say.
I've been doing digital media since 1987. I had a series of CD-ROM companies and a number of internet companies, including Zoom.com, which is a large community website. And that was started in 1996, went public in 1998. And in about 3 years ago, I started Before It's News. I noticed something interesting happening with the bloggers. They were leading the news by anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 days. And so I decided to create a YouTube for news, if you will. And this is what it's evolved into. It's Before It's News. So it's a platform for people to get their news out. That's really the main goal of Before It's News, is to support the bloggers and provide services to them beyond what the normal hosting is. And one of the things we've noticed is that if you have any edgy stories or anything that a lot of people consider to be, they don't like the news of what you're telling people, and they'll just take your site down. So we have very very liberal policies with our bloggers about what we allow. We have terms of service, so we don't allow things like copyright violation, defamation, that sort of thing. But if people want to talk about UFOs all day long, we're happy to have them on our site. Or if they have conspiracy theories, which eventually a lot of them become conspiracy facts, they're welcome to be on our site too. So it's a free-ranging. It's like driving on a road without lines on the pavement.
So how do you manage people's when people submit a story to you? Does that go to an editorial team then for them to review and comment on before it gets posted?
It does. The first time they submit a story, yes, it does that. But after that, we pretty much leave people alone, and we rely on our audience to complain about things. If someone's doing a lot of cursing or those sorts of things, obviously someone will bring that to our attention. We may see it. We do have some editors who do watch the front page and some of the news stories coming in. But it's a very light touch. I mean, we don't, there's a lot of things that we let through that I think a lot of other sites might shut down because they don't agree with the point of view.
And I mean, how do you get away with copyright, or how do you deal with copyright issues, and how do you get away with people demanding that stuff does get taken down? Because there must be times that there are allegations of defamation or copyright infringement.
Oh yeah, we've had all that stuff. We get it. There's a little bit of it. I won't say it happens every day. It doesn't happen every day. I'd say probably once or twice a week we get a complaint, and we probably take it down. We follow, and we're registered with the Copyright Office here in the U.S. for the Digital Millennial Copyright Act. So we follow the law, which basically, because we're a hosting provider service, we don't actually create our own news per se. We just provide hosting. And so there's a safe harbor in the U.S. copyright law that allows us to just remove people's copyright. If one of our contributors takes too much of a copyrighted material, I mean, there's fair use, which is a little different here in the U.S. than in the U.K. But the concept is the same, which is that people have the right to talk about things, they don't necessarily have the right to copy them wholesale. And so, for critical reviews, parody, things like that, there's a wide swath of exception in copyright law. And so we follow the law. It's that simple. If someone has a story that, that they copied from somewhere else and someone complains about it, we'll just take it right down. And so we do have a number of people, and we sit around, and that's what they do. They watch for complaints. They interact with the contributors. If they have a problem, if there's a bug in our system that we're not getting things done right, we get that fixed. Those kind of things.
Okay, and is there any legislation on the way then that could affect the ability to provide that service? I mean, in the UK, for example, we've got more and more legislation coming in. We've got a new Defamation Act. We've got legislation which is going to regulate the press, and in fact, they're including bloggers and the internet in the scope of that legislation. In fact, the penalties are stronger against the bloggers and the internet, as opposed to people that are opting to actually join the club that the legislation's geared towards. So, I mean, what's going on legislation-wise in the States that's upcoming that may affect the stuff that you're doing then?
Well, everybody knows about the laws that they were trying to pass that, Aaron Swartz, the famous technologist who recently killed himself, was against the CISPA, SOPA, those different acts in various reincarnations. They're always trying to push stuff like that through. And so far, to date, we haven't had any, nothing's happened on that front. Although I believe in the future, I think the future of alternative media is going to be in private networks. And I think actually things will be driven underground, because once the controlled demolition of the economy takes place, and that's exactly what it is. It's you can see where the charges are set up, the derivatives that have been put in place, the large banks that moved. Bank of America, for example, moved about $70 trillion of notional value of derivatives onto the bank, which is the bank where people have their savings accounts. So, and the derivatives, according to Chapter 14 of the bankruptcy law, which a lot of people don't know about, take precedence over deposits and things like that. So, what's happened is you've got a lot of these things that are in place, and they're definitely not going to want to they're not going to want people talking about what's going on. There's no doubt about that. And so they'll try all different kinds of ways to shut down the internet. One will be they'll turn off the DNS service for some kind of a cyber false flag or something like that. And it could be a real cyber attack or cyber war type of thing. And but like they say, don't let a crisis go to waste. So that's really what I think we've got coming, and that'll drive everything underground into private networks. And we've actually been developing some software that will allow us to do this and allow people to privately share and communicate with each other. It's called Unseen. It's at unseen.com, unsene.com. If you don't mind me putting a plug in for it. It's in beta right now, and it's got some bugs. We know about some of them, and we're finding others. But it's that's where the future is, where every message is encrypted, and people communicate directly with each other. They create networks of trusted friends, just like they used to in East Germany and the Soviet Union. That's where it's going.
So how do you build your trust with the user base of that network? Because obviously people are becoming more and more nervous of organizations that are maybe providing that kind of service, that there may be some kind of backdoor and this kind of thing. So how do you build the trust of that then?
Well, trust is earned. It always is. And although in the case of paper money, you can legislate it to some extent by legal tender laws and force people to accept things. But in general, at the end of the day, it's earned. And so, we will be, obviously, we don't have an interest in putting in a backdoor. Our interest is in just providing security and a service for people. And what will happen is that they will be generating their own keys. one of the big things that you notice with some of these services is who keeps the keys.
Yeah.
If the service itself keeps the keys, the problem is then you've got a database somewhere that people can hack into. And that could be, governments, it could be bad hackers, it could be people who are, trying to steal people's bank account information and thieves. So you've got that issue, and we don't keep the keys. The individual keeps their own keys. They have their own passphrase, everything's encrypted with that, and if they lose it, it's too bad. We don't keep a copy of it. We don't. We actually had our first person who lost their passphrase, couldn't remember it, and I just had to send this nice lady an email and said, "Hey, Teresa, I'm sorry, I can't help you. We don't have it. So what you're going to do is you're going to lose all your old messages, and then you can just start over and reset it. But that's up to you. That's the individual that's going to have to keep that, and we're not going to be responsible for that kind of information in our system, because frankly it's a problem. I mean, it's a security risk. Even the biggest banks. I mean, you look at the security that they go through. If you are a software engineer and you go to work in the biggest banks, they basically take everything out of your pockets: memory sticks, keychains, cell phones, anything that has an electronic device that people can either carry something in or out of secure areas. And I mean, that's how banks do it. And I think at some point in the future, I mean, we're not there yet, we're in beta, but we will be at that same level of security, because it's important for people. And I think that, trust is earned, and to the extent that we can do a good job of this, we'll earn people's trust, and they'll want to use it. But you have to think about it this way also. This service is not just about people sending messages back and forth to each other. This service is also about distributing media. So in other words, you'll have publish and subscribe functionality with this service. That will be like an RSS feed, but it's fully encrypted, and you'll have a key. When someone sends it out, it'll be encrypted with your key. You'll be the only person who will be able to decrypt it. And it turns out that there are a whole lot of services that we can build on that are, I think, very valuable. Groups of people who want to organize, peacefully organize, can speak in private. Now, keep in mind, it's a cat and mouse game, and the next frontier is, of course, the real back door is going to be your computer itself. And keyloggers, that'll be a feature that's built into the next upgrades of the operating systems, I'm pretty convinced. Keylogging, screen grabbing, if you've ever had your computer and, in the middle of the night start making noise, and then all of a sudden you see the screen flashing and moving through a bunch of different screens, that's probably someone else accessing your computer from a remote location. So, that is all now built into these computers, and that's, once we get the encryption part done, we'll be looking at ways to help protect people from that kind of thing. But everybody's going to have to make choices. And you'll have to choose who you trust as your friends. And as we saw from East Germany, Stasi had files on everyone. All your neighbors, all of your friends, your relatives were spying on you. And I mean, I think that we're going to be in that kind of a situation. That's where the whole, if you see something, say something. That's what this is turning into. It's turning into East Germany.
Yeah. So, what services will this platform provide? Is it going to be almost a rival to Skype?
Well, it'll provide Skype-like functionality. It does that right now. I'm actually very happy with the way that's turned out. Email. The original goal was to replace email and Skype with secure versions of both. Email, of course, is the most insecure media there is, because it's like sending a postcard.
Yeah.
So what happens is when you send a piece of email, it's all the text is in plain text. We've known for a fact since at least 1998 that the NSA has been gathering up every email sent by everyone. They've just been vacuuming up the internet, and the reason I know that is because when I went on a co-location tour for Zoom.com, the ISP at the time, I said, "What's that room back there?" And he said, "That's the NSA room." I said, "Well, what are they doing here?" He said, "Well, they've got switching equipment that's grabbing every web visit. So every web visit that you've made, they've got a copy of that. Every email that's sent, I would say it's very likely that that's in a database somewhere. And recently, they just announced that they're going to build a $2 billion data center in Utah. Now, why would you go spend $2 billion on a data center unless you knew that you were going to be able to really put this data to use?
Yeah.
And what they've done is, my understanding, just looking at the way things are occurring right now in the space, it looks to me like they have now successfully been able to integrate and fused all the data from these different sources. And now they can match it up with Facebook, Twitter, all these things. All these real-time things are coming in, and they're just being sucked up and then added to someone's file. And the question is, how is this going to be used? And my opinion is, and I think history bears this out, the first group of people that it will be used against are political opponents. Now, look at a couple of examples. Justice John Roberts of the U.S. Supreme Court. Why would he change his mind suddenly on his Obamacare opinion? And there's been some back chatter on the internet, and I'm not sure if this is true or not. I'm just going to say it's a rumor, but it makes sense. Is that there was something about John Roberts, maybe one of his adoptions. He has kids who were adopted that wasn't quite, what most people would consider kosher by the book or whatever. And maybe they skirted around a few things. Who knows? I'm not going to make any accusations because it might not be true. But the fact is, he changed his mind completely. And he ended up writing both opinions. Now, I don't know if any time in history where that's ever happened before, where a Supreme Court justice wrote both sides of the opinion. The second one is, of course, General Petraeus. Where did those emails come from, the 3-year-old emails? And Google, if you have Gmail, the retention policy is basically indefinite. I mean, storage is now free, so, a 2 terabyte drive is $80. And you can imagine when you buy things in bulk, it gets even cheaper.
Yeah.
But the point is, General Petraeus' emails, something just didn't make sense. Why is the FBI investigating a catfight between 2 women? It just doesn't make any sense. And the press didn't bother to ask any questions about that, and they just turned up these emails and said, well, this is what it is. And then he resigned, and that was why he was forced out. And you have to imagine, who has access to all this data that's been collected? It's a very, very powerful tool. So when you see people in the next, during this session of Congress, when you look and you see people who all of a sudden change their mind about important votes, well, I changed my mind. I'm now voting in favor of gun control, and I'm a member of the NRA. You'll see that kind of stuff happen. Those people are being blackmailed.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So, watch out for that. Your viewers and readers should watch out for that. And the next step after that is, of course, political dissidents. Once they get the political opponents out of the way, then they go after the political dissidents.
So are you seeing any kind of moves to shut down the press in the United States the way that we have over here? Or is the press just utterly controlled already, in your view?
I don't think they're ever going to really be able to fully control the press here. Although mostly they are controlled. The mainstream media here are completely controlled. I mean, there's no doubt about it. They have stories that they spike, that they don't allow. It's only the rise of the alternative media, starting with Matt Drudge, actually. I'd give him credit. When he broke the Monica Lewinsky story, that story was going to be buried by the media. And Matt Drudge, when he announced, and he posted that story about Monica Lewinsky, that then eventually broke open, you found all these different outlets the story had been shot to that had said, no, we don't want to write a bad story about Bill Clinton. Now, if that had been Monica Lewinsky and George W. Bush, they would have done all kinds of things about it.
Yeah.
It would have been front page news immediately. In fact, probably before they had the whole story. But the point is, there are still certain memes that they will allow out. But in general, there are a lot of things that they are trying to push down on. There's no doubt about it. Now, what is happening here in the U.S.? Obviously, there are people who say, when you hear a senator say something to the effect of, China's got the right business model, or China's got the right model. Well, that's actually a completely evil thing. Because if you look at what happens in China today, they imprison people, force them to work in prison camps. They take innocent Christians, Falun Gong practitioners, and the like, and literally persecute these people to death. So when I hear someone say something like that, it immediately gets me, alert, because this is something that everybody has a choice to make. And someone told me one time her father was a Holocaust survivor. She said, "My dad said that the Holocaust was preventable." I said, "How could that be? How is that possible?" And it's because when the person, the policeman came to arrest her father and her father's family, he could have said, "Hey, this is a great family. They serve society. They've always been nice and kind-hearted. I'm not going to arrest this person and haul him away." The person who drove the train could have said, "I've got these boxcars full of human beings. I'm not going to do it." And then the person who pushed him in the oven, of course, he could have said, "I'm not going to do this." So, you've got all these different people every step of the way, but they were afraid more for their own life. And in the end, what do they have out of it? So the point is that people are going to have to start making choices. And one of the choices with free press is, how free is the press? Right? How free do we allow it to be? And obviously there are some limits of you don't want people putting out things that are completely false, that damage other people. But people should have a free hand in saying what they want to. And that's why if you look at our site, we've got all kinds of things. We've got UFOs. We've got New World Order stories. We've got all these alternative things covered. We've also got mainstream stories. But a lot of things are focused on things like the alternative ways of healing that don't involve using pharmaceutical drugs. We've got financial stories written by people who are financial insiders, who have domain knowledge that's far in excess of what any journalist has. And so I think it's, they will try and push down on this. One way that we've seen, and it's actually not going to be through legislation, I don't think. One thing that we've seen is you've noticed a lot of Google malware warnings that pop up on the web.
Yeah.
And what they are, that's like a test run right now. They've also tested just plain filtering and blocking websites. We had, Before It's News has been blocked a number of times by ISPs like Verizon. We had one person who worked for us who had Verizon from her ISP at home. She could get to any website, but she couldn't get to Before It's News. It just got a white screen. She'd go to Starbucks, same computer, same everything. She could get right to our site. That was a different ISP. That was running T-Mobile or some other ISP. We had one person who contacted Verizon tech support, and they finally, after he called about 5 or 6 people, they said, "Oh, okay, I think we found the problem," and all of a sudden the site came on.
Yeah.
So what's happening is it's a very subtle form of censorship, and they can get away with that for a long time. Email is also being censored as well. And we've had reports of people who forward our newsletters, and they send them out every day to their friends. They got one lady said, "Hey, I had a problem with this last email. None of my friends got the email." I said, "Well, what was the headline? What was the subject line?" He said, "This one was, is Obama gay?" And for some reason that hit the filters, and it just didn't even get through. So the problem is that you have to realize with the internet now is that they are going to make it, the first step for them is not to pass the laws, just to start losing things. And so they just create a black hole on the internet of, and you don't know, if you don't get something, you don't know what you're missing.
Well, I mean, even the fact that Google and possibly Yahoo and maybe Bing are the only ways to search the internet these days, it's that in itself is a form of censorship, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, you can be, we've been, Before It's News, we have a love-hate relationship with Google. I mean, I was VP of marketing at Lyco, so I understand deeply how search engines work and how difficult it is what Google does. I mean, it is a technological marvel. That is why people use it. It's incredible. When you think about the number of pages in the catalog, billions upon billions of pages, and to be able to deliver a search result as fast as they do, it's amazing. It really is. But what happens is that people assume that everything that Google does is by a machine, and it just does whatever the machine spits out. But that's actually not true, because the machine is actually controlled by humans. Remember, humans write the algorithms. So you can block something because there's a lot of spam. You can create whatever rules you want to. As a consequence, we've gone from absolutely no search traffic on Google to a lot of search traffic on Google. And it usually follows trends where when the Sandy Hook incident took place, we had a lot of stories. I mean, that was pretty obvious. There were a lot of questions that people had about that, a lot of curiosities around that whole situation. And of course, the reason why it happened is, what they're doing with it, whether it happened for, whether it was a conspiracy theory or it actually happened the way everybody says it did. I'm not even going to get into that. But the point is, it's being used as a lever to get gun control here in the U.S. And they're trying to pass these draconian laws, which so far they've been pretty successful at in places like New York. It looks like California and a few other places. Illinois will probably follow suit. But the point is, people, when you have a search engine like this where it's so powerful that everybody uses it, Facebook can do the same thing. They can just say, we're turning this off right now, and people won't even know that they're missing something. That's why the private network is going to be the way news and information is stored in the future, is my opinion.
Yeah.
Because if I have sources of information that I can get and I can have delivered privately with full encryption, people don't know what you're talking about. It's a plain brown wrapper for delivery of the news. I mean, I hate to say it, but in the old days, the plain brown wrapper was where people got their pornography. And what's happened is the whole world is now turned upside down. That the truth now has to be put in the plain brown wrapper. So that is what's happening with search. And can you trust all the search results? What they do is they edit it by omission. So it's just like they do on CNN or any other large media outlet. Well, we told the truth. Look at the facts. Here are the facts. We've got the whole story here. But you don't have all the facts. And you haven't investigated the other important facts. And a good example of that is Obama's birth certificate, which they basically just pushed down his social security number, draft registration. If that was Sarah Palin or George W. Bush, they would have just gone crazy over it. But Obama is being protected. That's apparently what's happening.
Do you have a view on why that might be?
Well, right now, he is the person who's been chosen to execute the plan that's being implemented right now. And until that changes or until he becomes more useful as something else in some other role, that's the role he's going to be playing. And the media is in full support of it. It's a control structure, and the media now is controlled by this group, this force, if you will, of that has an agenda of what they want to do to the world. They want to change. They want to transform the world. They want change to come to the world, and that's why they have these slogans like "Forward" and these kind of things that bring in images of Hitler and Lenin, who use the same slogan for National Socialism and communism. And but people are now paying attention. They're now waking up. They're saying, "Wait a second, what's happening here?" And what'll happen is people will continue going along as long as the bank account stays full and they can watch their plasma screen TVs, their big screen TVs, and beer and circuses, I guess you could call it. It used to be bread and circuses, now it's beer and circuses. And then it'll work until the power goes out.
Yeah.
And at some point they'll flip the switch, and I think you'll see a lot of people who are absolutely in a state of shock. The rest of us who've been paying attention, it's a lot like. There's a book by William Schurer, who was a reporter for the New York Times and International Herald Tribune, called Berlin Diary. He was a reporter in Berlin before World War II. And so Germany's at war with the rest of Europe, and the United States is not entered. So he's a reporter covering what's going on in Berlin. And his diary, I recommend it to all of your listeners and viewers. Go read that book, because it is, when you see it, everybody knew what was going on, but people were in a state of suspension of disbelief. They didn't want to believe it because they didn't want it to happen. That's where we are today.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's just move it on a little bit. You've been talking about the Christopher Dorner case for quite, you were covering it as it happened. The last I saw on this was that they're claiming that his death was probably self-inflicted. But just because it's a British audience and perhaps some people haven't been following the case, can you just give us a bit of background on that and bring us up to date with what you think happened there and what's going on at the moment with it, if you would, please?
Sure. So just to rewind, Christopher Dorner is a former LAPD, Los Angeles Police Department, a police officer here in the U.S. who had been fired from the police force. And it was acrimonious. He appealed the firing a number of times, and he claimed that there was a person who had been arrested, who was on the ground, who had then been kicked by another police officer, and called a bunch of epithets and things like that were not correct. And the situation in LA is a little different than other places. There's been a history of police abuse, in particular the black community in LA has been abused, or at least claims to be abused. I think it's a fair assessment that they have been abused. And what happened was, so Chris Dorner was a police officer. He gets off this. He is kicked off the force. 4 years later, he goes on this rampage. And what they claim is that he killed two people who were the children or the in-laws of his of the captain, who supposedly had defended him in his and had gone to bat for him in his hearings, and not unsuccessfully. And so they positioned this as a revenge killing of these two people, and that started this manhunt for Chris Dorner. Now, if you go back in time and you look at the LA Times accounting of this, their account of it, it says he probably killed these people. Now, I don't know about you, but this is almost like someone's being persecuted here, because they have information from the inside. They have they're a whistleblower. They have things that can be very uncomfortable. Maybe he has other evidence that he can provide that will show problems with the LAPD. But anyway, that's his point of view. Now, the point of view of the LAPD is he killed these two people. We're going to have this giant manhunt. He's on the run. So the first thing they do is they go and frighten everybody in Southern California. They get over $1 million reward for information leading to his capture and conviction. Now, how many times has there been $1 million reward issued that quickly for somebody? It's usually $10,000, $20,000, $50,000. It's not $1 million. This is like Osama bin Laden. And what it does is it gets a lot of attention in the media. And what happened is it's almost like watching OJ driving down the freeway. People are all looking for him. Where was he cited? He was down in San Diego. He was here. He was here. And it turned out that it looks like he was holed up in Big Bear. And where our involvement came into this was we found one of our editors found a Facebook page that looked like it belonged to him. And I went and checked it out, and I said, yeah, this definitely looks like it's his, just from the tone and everything else. What happened also is there was a starting to rain here, manifesto that was delivered to news organizations, and CNN received a coin with 3 bullet holes in it, and a DVD with rants and raves about how I've been wronged. They killed Old Yeller. All these problems that they had with with the police department and everything else. The problem with the manifesto is it looks like it was written by multiple people. So the issue is who really wrote this. What happened with Chris Dorner? What really happened? And the frank truth is, I don't think anybody's ever going to know, not for a while, what actually happened. Because in the end, they found him actually in a house, in a cabin that was right across the street from the police station in Big Bear, California, which is a ski resort about 2 hours drive from LA, up in the mountains. And the people who owned the house were going in to clean it, and he tied them up and tried to escape. But to backtrack a bit, While this manhunt was going on, the LAPD were out literally stopping and shooting people. It's like the new policy is stop and shoot. There were two Hispanic ladies driving a pickup truck that did not match the description. It was a different color, different make and model of the pickup truck that Chris Dorner had been seen driving, and 50 bullet holes in the back. So, people were definitely jumpy, and I understand cops. I have two brother-in-laws who are former Jersey City cops in New Jersey. And I understand how police can be, they're under fire, and it's a very, very difficult job. And we love police. They're here to help society. But when they do this is not appropriate in a civilian environment. This is more like a war zone. And I think part of what the reason for that was is to condition people that this is the new normal. You're going to be starting to get roadblocks. You're going to get shot at. And what ended up happening with Chris Dorner in the end was they burned down the cabin. The radio, the police, the radio, they sent all of the helicopters away, so you actually don't know exactly what really happened. Whether it's really Chris Dorner's body, whether they brought something else in. Maybe Chris Dorner was already killed. Maybe he didn't exist. Maybe he was killed in the fire. Maybe that's true. But there's no way to know because they sent the news media helicopters were shooed away by the Federal Aviation Administration, and the police radio went silent after a period of time, but not until after they said we're going to burn this place down. They basically intentionally burned it down. Now we heard a report that he tried to surrender, and they forced him back in the cabin and literally burned him up. So whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I'm just sharing this rumor with your audience here. But there are a lot of unanswered questions, and you notice as soon as the fire happened and he was dead, the coroner declared him dead. The story just disappeared from news media.
I mean, in the press here, they're saying absolutely categorically that they did not intentionally burn the cabin, but what you're saying implies that the radio, at least the evidence from the radio, implies that in fact they did do that.
Yeah, I think so. Well, when you listen to the police scanner, I mean, there's the way it works here in the U.S. The police use certain radio frequencies. And these radio frequencies can be monitored by anybody with a police scanner. A radio that's set to scan all the different frequencies.
Yeah.
And those were recorded. I mean, there are people here who are enthusiasts of following police scanners, and they record all this stuff. And it's pretty damaging. I mean, it says, put the burners in right now. And some people said, well, that's just what they call this particular type of smoke grenade, because a lot of times it burns a house down. But why wouldn't you just sit there and let the guy get hungry in a couple days? I mean, what's he going to do? You block off the streets. You don't have to burn down a house. Just try and negotiate with him and get him to come out. And instead of doing that, it's just like, nope, we're going to go in and we're going to get them. The other thing that happened, too, is that, in law enforcement, there's what's called local jurisdiction here in the U.S. The local cops have the authority, and they're the ones, they are the law in their community. And so what happens is that the LAPD sent a whole bunch of people up to go after Dorner. And they were probably the ones who went in and just blasted him and burned the place down. That's my guess. I would just imagine that there's always got to be some kind of a peaceful resolution possible with these kind of things. But the issue is they didn't want that. That's not what they wanted. They wanted to kill the guy, and he knew it. When I talked to him on Facebook, I asked him. I said, did you kill these people? And he said point blank, no, I did not kill these people. There was another report in the LA Times that said the people who actually were tied up by him said Dorner told them he only wanted to clear his name. Now, why would somebody who killed two people try and clear his name? I mean, someone who clears his name, who's thinking about that, is someone who's innocent.
Yeah.
So I think there are a lot of questions here that really deserve some investigation.
Well, in the UK, we're finding that the relationship or the style of policing that we're experiencing in this country is changing. And whereas in the past, police were absolutely part and parcel of the community. Policing is becoming much more aggressive, much more antagonistic towards the public. Is that? I mean, obviously in the States, police have always carried firearms and so on. But what is the attitude, or is the attitude changing between police and communities?
Well, I think police are having to make a choice. That's absolutely correct. The police always came from the local community. And, in fact, they were originally called peace officers because they were supposed to keep the peace.
Yeah.
Somewhere that changed into becoming law enforcement officers, that they are supposed to enforce the law as opposed to keep the peace. If someone is breaking the law, but they're doing it without a bad intent and they're not doing it intentionally, in other words, let's say that I'm doing something that the police don't like, for example. I'm going 6 miles an hour over the speed limit, but there's no signs posted, and there's some little kids around. In the old days, the police would stop and say, "Hey, you're going a little fast here," because if you were in your own community, I mean, obviously you had an interest in being a good citizen to society. What's happened now is that they are dividing. It's the same divisive kind of technique that's being used in politics. You see that all over the world. UK, here in the US, it's happening everywhere. And what they're doing is they're using politics as a way to divide people and to get them to fight amongst each other. And that is a technique used by Marxists around the world. They always have a group of people that they're trying to persecute, whether it's Falun Gong in China, whether it's the 1%. Now it's about to become in the U.S. the gun owners and the preppers. That's pretty obvious, even though FEMA tells people, hey, you should have at least a week's worth of food and supplies around. Now it's like, well, you have any kind of, you're hoarding if you have anything to support yourself. So what they're doing is they're changing the dialogue with society to the point where they are pitting law enforcement against the citizenry. They are also using federal money from the federal government. Here where I live in Northern California, the county I live in, they announced they just got a $350,000 armored vehicle, just in case there are some terrorist things. Now, it's completely insane why they would ever need something like this, unless they are going to use it to go up to, create a Chris Dorner, go up to the house and, run over the house with this thing. It's completely armored. I mean, this is one of those things where I don't even think a 50 caliber bullet would go through this thing. It's pretty well armored. So why do they need it? And this is happening to police departments all around the country. And I don't know if anybody remembers, but Obama had a speech where he said, what we need is a civilian policing force that's just as strong and just as big as our military.
Yeah.
Now, why the heck would you need that? You move from keeping the peace, which is looking at the intention of people and looking at their hearts, and saying, okay, this person really didn't mean to harm this person. The police would just try and let people work things out amongst themselves. You didn't have this giant backlog of court cases. The prisons, I mean, we have an all-time record high of people in prisons here in this country. In fact, in the whole world, I think we're probably the leading country for people in prison as per capita. Not counting China's, Laogai, which is the prison camps, and not counting those kind of situations in those kind of repressive countries. But out of all the free countries, we've criminalized almost everything. And so when that is the case, all of a sudden, if everything is a crime, you can then selectively enforce the crime based on political affiliation or whatever you feel like. That's what's happening now. So, for example, there was someone in Washington, D.C. who drove into town. He got stopped by the Park Service, I think it was. They saw something in his backseat. He had been out to a gun range. He was a shooter. There was a 30-round clip that was sitting in his back seat that was legal where he came from, but not legal in the District of Columbia. They arrested him, and he's had to go through. He's in jail. He's gone through all kinds of things. And then there was a news reporter who took a 30-round clip, took it on the air, and waved it around on the screen, and they let that guy off. So the message that's coming down for people is, the ordinary people of society is, The laws are not for our masters. They are only for you, the slaves. That's the message that people are getting loud and clear. And when they see that, it's not just that. It's like MF Global, where basically $1.2 billion, actually more like $1.6 billion, was looted from the accounts, sent to JP Morgan, and then the place went bankrupt. There wasn't even one. These are supposed to be segregated customer accounts. So these are farmers, people who are just individual people who might have had a little bit of money, and it's gone. I mean, they might get a little bit back, pennies on the dollar, but it's just gone. So what people are realizing now, that is what creates the situation of us versus them. When you have uneven application of the law, when police officers, peace officers, are turned into law enforcement officers, and then forced to, by their political masters, enforce or not enforce the law on someone, all of a sudden, people are watching that. They realize what's going on, and it's not pretty at all. And I'm not saying people are going to get violent about it, but I am saying that I think a lot of people are going to start withdrawing and just not wanting to participate in that kind of thing. And what happens when you see that is people will start to communicate privately. They don't necessarily want to share their views with everybody. And you have to remember, Hitler was elected with just over 30% of the vote in Germany. And that was enough to get him elected, and then he slowly grabbed power over time. And I'm not saying everybody in the government here is like Hitler, I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that if people aren't careful, Germany at the time was the most civilized country in the world. They had the most patents issued of any country. They had the highest level of science and technology in the world. And if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, David Cameron was elected on a similar amount of the vote, so it's not unprecedented.
Well, it's the thing is, I don't really know that people have a choice to when they're voting. It's candidate A or candidate B, and they both seem to have been captured by this system of this control grid system.
So you don't envisage civil unrest as being an immediate reaction then?
People. I think the things that caused civil unrest. If you look at history in the U.S. Now, I'm not going to talk about other countries. I'll just talk about the U.S. In the U.S., what has caused civil unrest historically has been the Rodney King riots, for example, where there was a video that was shown on TV of a black man who was being arrested by the police, LAPD, being beaten. And it's been happening for a long time, and all of a sudden, here is a case where it happened. And it was caught on videotape. And I mean, that was probably the novelty of the time, was not that many people carried video cameras around. And then to have something that had a good enough CCD or capturing element in the camera that could record it in the dark. It was actually fairly dark. It was at night. And so that was really the first time. What I think is going to happen now is it's going to be things like a financial crisis, the banks close and people can't get to their money, the credit cards stop working and people have to use cash to buy things, EBT cards, which are like food welfare cards. They're just like credit cards. They look just like a credit card, but they're paid for by the government as food stamps are. If those get turned off, you could see mass civil unrest. If there's a financial crisis, I think you could see mass civil unrest. If there is a major attempt to take people's guns, I think you will see resistance and civil unrest in some fashion. Certainly civil disobedience. But people here have had it pretty good for a long time, and I don't think that they realize how fast things can turn. During the Rodney King riots, I lived in LA, and so to share with your viewers here what that was like, it was like a surreal experience. I woke up one morning, I wasn't paying attention to the local news, I was developing a software product at the time, so I was working these crazy hours. I smelled this burning, I thought it was the oil refinery down in Torrance or somewhere that had caught fire because it smelled like burning rubber. And then got a call at about 6 o'clock in the morning, someone saying, "Are you guys okay?" And turned on the news, and holy smokes, Rome was burning. And literally, what happened was, after the Rodney King riots, the verdict came out, people were so upset, they started going out, and they were so angry, they just started going out and looting stores and burning things and causing all kinds of mayhem. You can see the videos on YouTube, just people roaming the streets, cars, people shooting out of cars, people going into stores, just, literally hundreds, thousands of people going into stores looting. And there was nothing, the police just went home to protect their families. What happens is, after a day or so, you reach a tipping point. And that is when the police, who are on the streets, who have the inside knowledge of what's really going on out there, when they go home to protect their families, it only takes between 12 and 24 hours from that to happen for full mayhem to start taking place, because then the criminals realize that the police are no longer around to keep them in check. And it's almost like, free shopping at all the stores. They just go out and rampage and loot and burn and whatever. People were going out looting grocery stores and liquor stores, and then setting it on fire after they looted it, and then going home and watching it on the news. Because you had all these helicopters. This is LA. So you had all these helicopters. But just a completely surreal experience. And that I expect, my feeling then was, wow, this is what it's going to be like for the end of the world. And after 3 or 4 days, the National Guard came in and restored order. But it was really a weird situation, and I think you could definitely have something like this happen again.
So, what do you see are the solutions? Because we like to focus on solutions where we can. My concern about sort of private networks is that people become introverted. They only talk to their particular group, and it becomes more difficult to get word out on a mass basis. But how do we solve the kind of regime, or how do we deal with the kind of regime that seems to be installing itself both in the United States and in Europe, actually?
Well, I think the first thing is that you have to look inside yourself. You really do. It's about looking inward, and we have to rectify the things in ourselves first before we can start going outside. We can't pass any more laws. We've got too many laws already. Passing more laws doesn't work. It doesn't do anything. All it does is turn more people into criminals. And that's exactly what's been going on for the last probably 40 or 50 years. So, what can we do? Well, I think that we have to start following a higher law, if you will, a law of heaven, if you will, where there's a higher law that people need to follow, which is, be kind to other people, be compassionate, be truthful, and also be tolerant. Those are the three things. Those are the three tenets that I think what people have to do. And really, I think by Forge News is very much against any kind of violence as a solution. Now, we're not saying people shouldn't protect themselves. We're not saying that at all. That's up to the individual to figure out their own circumstance and to do what they think is necessary to protect themselves. Because I also think that you should uphold the righteous, and you should expose and punish the evil. You should do those things. So, following those kind of guidelines, what should an individual person do? I think the individual person, like I said earlier, you have to look inside yourself, and then you have to try and rectify whatever things you have in your own self that are incorrect with these things, with these concepts, the truth, compassion, and tolerance kind of a concept. And once you do that, and you start looking at the world a whole different way, then you're going to go out and you're going to be helpful to people. You're going to be a valuable part of society, because you're helping society. You're not doing things that are negative. You're not doing things, you're not a burden on society. And I think that the question is, voting doesn't matter. I don't think voting doesn't make any difference anymore. You've got electronic voting machines, and there is no way to audit them. So voting is a joke. And like Stalin might have famously said, I'm not sure if this has been completely attributed to him, but I don't care who votes. I care who counts the votes. So voting, I don't think, is going to matter. And in fact, what they're doing now here in the U.S. is they're importing another 20 million people who will be voters soon. And so the voting won't make any difference. In fact, in the U.S., in the earliest days, only 20 or 30% of the population bothered to vote, because the politicians couldn't do anything. They couldn't tax people. They couldn't pass laws to keep people from doing things. People were free and on their own. They could do whatever they wanted to. And then they started slowly imposing this control system on people. And so at some point, what people have to do is they have to start going off the grid. They have to start supporting each other. They have to do it in a nonviolent way. And, you don't have to participate in a lot of these things. And you can tell people to their face to say, hey, I think this is wrong. I think it's wrong when you arrest people who are peacefully protesting. It's wrong when the police stand there and spray pepper spray in the faces of people who are sitting in Davis, California, protesting peacefully. That is wrong. And, people have to point this out to other people, because what's happened is the moral compass is broken. That's really what the problem is. It's a moral problem. It has nothing to do with all these other factors. It is a moral problem at its core. And that has to change one day at a time, one person at a time. It's not a top-down problem. It's a bottom-up solution. And that is where I think alternative media and outlets like Before It's News and your show will play the biggest role. That is what we need to be focusing on right now.
Okay, well, Chris, that's been an hour, and it's gone very, very quickly. I'd like to say, okay, so just like to thank everybody for watching that, and we'll see you again tomorrow.